I won't lie. I mean, building wealth was part of my objective. I wanted to, to earn money, but to me, it was more about independence. To me, the principal allure of being an entrepreneur, I really liked the creativity, the autonomy that came with running my own business. Every time that there's a failure, you might evaluate that. What could I have done better? Improve your little pitch the next time. I didn't spend that frivolously, capriciously. I made sure that every, dollar was spent wisely as to the extent of my abilities.
You're listening to part 2 of my awesome conversation with Joe Mansueto, the CEO of Morningstar. If you haven't yet listened to part 1, be sure to check that one out first. Without further ado, here's part 2 with the amazing Joe Mansueto. One of the most common questions I get from people who want to start their own company is about raising capital. How do you do it? How do you start? And it usually comes from friends and family. In your case at Morningstar, you put in $80,000 of your own money to start, and then over the next 5 years, you put in another $250,000. Half of that came from savings bonds that your dad had bought for you as a kid. You at some point discovered certain bonds and their bonds numbers. What kind of meaningful impact did that have on you to have your dad supporting you like that and pursue your dreams? And what's your advice to all the other parents out there whose kids want to start companies and the parents don't really want them to take the risk? How important is it for parents to say, I believe in you?
Yeah, I think hugely important. I think you ought to support your kids. And even though the idea might not seem like a great idea to you as the parent, I would still be supportive of your child. When I started my business, Morningstar, my dad didn't think it was a good idea. He's like, why are you leaving? You've got a great job. You're a stock analyst, you like investing. But my mom was very supportive. She said, if that's your passion, if that's what you want to do, go for it. And you're right that, I bootstrapped my company. And we could talk more about that. So I put in all the money I had.
Yeah.
I invested in stocks, earnings from a stock analyst, et cetera. And then I quickly ran through that. And so, but my father had, these savings bonds that he had in a safety deposit box. And, I noticed the dates on them when he provided them for us to kind of get a start in life. But as soon as we were born as children, he would go like every month and buy these savings bonds for us, $20, $25 savings bonds. And, my dad was an immigrant from, Italy. He came here, when he was 3 years old, and, kind of the typical immigrant story, and didn't have, a lot of money, but, through the Navy and, paid for his medical school training. And so he was just kind of getting started, but he set aside enough money to buy, there are 4 of us children, savings bonds for us, as we, were born. And he did that for probably the first, 5-10 years of our life. But then that compounded. And, the nominal value that he put in wasn't all that great. But the compounding over many years, turned into, $100,000, $200,000. And so when I cashed those, to use the funds from Morningstar, I know how hard my dad had worked, to earn those. And so, it just really impressed upon me the importance of, making sure those funds were well spent. And so I didn't spend that frivolously, capriciously. I made sure that every, dollar was spent wisely as to the extent of my abilities. But the fact that he had worked so hard, I knew how hard he worked, how hard he saved. And that, that was, a gift to me, to get a start in life. I was just doubly motivated to make sure that it worked. And so, I had that experience myself. And so, for parents out there of would-be entrepreneurs, I think whatever you can do to give your kids, a start in whatever dream they want to pursue. And it doesn't have to be a business. Maybe it's, supporting them as they pursue their acting career or writing career or whatever it is. I think it makes a strong statement that, will create an even greater bond between parent and child. And, it's part of a parental responsibility.
Similar to you, my dad didn't want me to leave my Sun America job. Eli Broad was my boss. I reported to him. I was very lucky to have that job. I had a managing director title at 27 years old. And I was learning from someone who's one of the most successful people in business at the time. I think he was one of only 3 people who had started 2 Fortune 500 companies. And when I told my dad I was going to leave to start a company based in Boston with no funding on technology that was unproven without a CEO, he thought I had lost my marbles. Then on my mom's side, she said, I believe in you. Not that he didn't, but he's very conservative. He's a lawyer, billed by the hour, worked very, very hard, self-made. But it was good to hear my mom say that you have to follow your instinct and your gut. And he did not understand what we were doing. It was highly technical. And yeah, we could explain, we invented a new way, a better, cheaper, faster way to serve web traffic more reliably. And he kind of got it, but he didn't know anything about the technology. He didn't know how deep it was, how unique it was, how proprietary the technology was. And one of my former interns, Ricky Horowitz, who's now my peer, came in and talked to our intern class the other day. And his advice was, don't listen to your parents. And the reason why, he's at an AI company and our parents don't really know what's going on in that world either. And he said they're not educated enough in the world of technology to know to give proper advice in today's business environment. Do you think that's true?
Yes and no. I mean, I think actually your story and my story are remarkably analogous. It's interesting how your father said no and your mom said yes. But, I think for the subject matter, I think parents are probably not qualified. I think that's right. But in terms of just starting a business in general, kind of not vetting the idea, maybe parents have, whether it's suitable for the child or not, maybe some bits of wisdom. But I think the broader point of your friend is probably right, that you've got to listen to your own gut, your own instincts. And, when we started, it sounds like you were 27 too when you started, and that's the age when I started. It's pretty rare for a 27-year-old to start a business. It's practically unheard of. Today it's common. Kids start businesses right out of college. And so it's much more accepted. It was a little more eyebrow raising when I did it, probably when you did it. People worked, even though I went to business school, entrepreneurship was not a thing then. Everybody wanted to go work at an investment bank or a consulting firm. There was 2 entrepreneurship classes at the University of Chicago Business School, and neither of them were well attended. I took them both, but it was just me and a few other people. But it was not a hot thing like it is today. But yeah, I would think, listen to your parents, but then you need to evaluate their advice. Obviously, both of us listened to heard our father's advice and decided, to take a different course. But our mother's advice was a little more supportive, and it was helpful to have that. But I think, around the subject matter, things like AI, somebody of our generation is probably not as helpful unless they're a professor in that area. And so, I think parents probably aren't the best sources of advice to vet entrepreneurial ideas. I would say that's true.
I actually left Sun America after 3 years. I was hired as the assistant to the chairman on my 27th birthday, but I started our tech company when I was 30 years old. I think I 30. Just turned 29, but similar to you, another one, I had a business in college. I sold t-shirts. And I copied the Nike logo and I said, just do it. And I put these beautiful Michigan colors and logos on the shirts. I saw people like Brad Keywell doing it, Lefkowski doing it. And I said, oh, if these guys can do it, so can I. And I would go door to door to each dorm. I'd buy the t-shirts for $5. I sold the short sleeves for $12. The long sleeves were $1 more. They cost me, and I sold those for $18. I got kicked out of every single dorm. I think there were 12 or 15 on campus. I went in one hallway, got kicked out. I went through the back door, went to another one. But it was super fun for me and a great experience in terms of cold calling. Because it's such an important skill. I think everything we do is sales related. We have to sell as a leader that we can hire and lead people. We have to sell people on coming to work with us. We have to sell our spouses that we're good people and good parents and husbands. We have to sell in business. You're selling a product, you're selling a Morningstar subscription service or whatever it is that you're doing. How important is cold calling to our success?
Yeah, I think cold calling, I've had a couple jobs in, throughout my, life where I've cold called, and you learn, what that's about, and that it's a numbers game, that you're not going to meet success with every prospective sale. But I think you learn a lot just about perseverance and numbers and handling rejection, processing that, not taking it personally. And then you learn little things that you can do to up your odds. Every time that there's a failure, you might evaluate that. What could I have done better? Improve your little pitch the next time and keep going. I've seen it in various businesses where people have to call, and some people, you get more emotionally distraught by rejection. And I think you have to overcome that. So I think this, any job where you're cold calling, I think will serve you well as an entrepreneur, because that's what it is. You've got to win over customers. You've got to call on them. And I know so much today is done, electronically, digitally. You're not, dealing one-on-one. But I still think, that one-on-one selling, is a very valuable skill to have. And, seek out a job where you do it. It may not be glamorous. You're selling knives or something, but it'll be good experience. Hopefully something you enjoy doing, like your Nike t-shirts. I think that's super valuable experience.
I also went door to door asking people to pave their driveways with a blacktop. I'd never done it before. And I figured, okay, I see people doing that. I probably went up to a front door. I mean, today you wouldn't knock on someone's front door to ask you to do it. It's a different world today. But I went to over 100 homes, didn't get one sale, but it was a very good experience. It was a very good experience. I didn't take it personally, and I learned a lot. Sometimes it doesn't work, but you got to keep coming back and keep fighting. This episode of In Search of Excellence is brought to you by Sandee.com. SANDEE.com. We're a Yelp for beaches and have created the world's most comprehensive beach resource by cataloging more than 100 categories of information for every beach in the world, more than 100,000 beaches in 212 countries. Sandee.com provides beachgoers around the world with detailed, comprehensive, and easy-to-use information to help them plan their perfect beach getaway at home and abroad, and to make sure you're never disappointed by a beach visit again. Plan the perfect beach trip today by visiting Sandee.com. That's www.sandee.com. The link is in our show notes. Stay Sandee, my friends. Let's talk about bootstrapping, which you mentioned. I think it's unusual to do so for first-time founders because they don't have the capital. And a lot of people, unlike what you did and what I did, they got out of college, they wanted to start a business. They don't realize the lessons and experience and importance of going to work somewhere else. What they do want to do, and is common, is they want to raise $10 million right out of the gate and hire people and go quickly. What's your advice to all the people out there who think raising money is a measure of our success, and talk about the dangers of doing so, not only on a short-term basis, but raising money at valuations that aren't sustainable, that limit potential outcomes?
Yeah, I always caution would-be entrepreneurs about raising money. To me, equity is very dear. You don't want to give up equity easily. And it may seem like a free good. You can just issue more stock and get money. Hey, that's a great thing. But it comes at a cost. And it's really not a badge of honor to raise a lot of money. And so I really caution would-be entrepreneurs to not raise a lot of money if you can avoid it. When I started Morningstar, as you mentioned, I bootstrapped it. I didn't think I had a fundamental idea as a 27-year-old. Moreover, I chose a business that didn't have high capital requirements. I knew this coming in as an analyst that it's a knowledge business, really. It's a data business, and the way I constructed the business model was that people paid up front for subscription. Even though everything was data-based in the beginning, we produced a publication from this database, but you had to subscribe to it, for a quarter or a year. So money was coming in before I had to deliver a product. So you have to think of how the money flows. So the money was coming in before I had to pay the printer, before I had to pay Barron's for the ad. And it's called deferred subscription revenue. So money is coming in, and that's really what funded the growth of Morningstar throughout our history, was this deferred subscription income, people paying advance for services to be delivered in the future. And so I always caution entrepreneurs to think about how the money flows. Most businesses, you put a lot of money up front into a factory, into inventory. Then you need to raise money, and then you get paid 60 days later. And then if the business is growing, the capital demands go up. You need more inventory, you need more factories. So I always like capital light businesses and businesses where people paid up front. I know a guy here in town, a friend of mine, he's an engineer, immigrant from the Ukraine, and, he was building power plants. But without any money, he convinced GE to sell him, I think, a couple $1 billion of turbines.
$5 billion, I think it was. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, I think you know the story. And then he found utilities to take the power. And without any money, he built a power plant. And then he sold this for, a fair amount of money. And he's still doing this today, building solar, plants and windmills and things. But he did it without, using his own capital. But anyway, it's, bootstrapping, you learn certain lessons about, spending money very frugally. I had a rule that I always used: whatever money was coming in, spend less. And to me, it was about the journey. It wasn't about, being the next Microsoft tomorrow. But I knew if we could compound at a high growth rate, eventually we would be big enough. So the first year in revenue, I did 97,000 in revenue, which I thought was pretty good. The next year, 120,000. So we grew 20%, but still we're only doing 120,000 in revenue. The next year, 400,000, then $1 million, $2 million, $4 million, 11 million, 20 million, 30 million. As you noted earlier, this year we'll do 2 billion in sales. That's after 40 years. Next year will be our 40th anniversary. But we've just kind of, one step ahead of the other. And so the idea that you're going to raise a lot of money and throw it at a problem and hire lots of people, that's a high wire act. It can work, but there's also a good chance you'll fall off the high wire. And, the people who put up the money, they have demands. You don't have time to iterate, learn. One of the things I liked about bootstrapping was that I could take my time to get to know my customer, improve the product, as we talked about earlier. It's not the first version. It wasn't the first product that really let Morningstar take off. It was our second product. But we kind of learned, iterated. And so you need that time. And so one of the downsides of giving up a lot of equity is that the time horizon is going to be really short. The demands, the expectations are going to be super high the more money you raise.
Right.
And so try and keep control, buy yourself the time. As I mentioned earlier, I worked for a venture capital firm for a bit, and I saw what happened. Usually the entrepreneur, the founder, at some point gets shown the door and professional management comes in.
Right.
And I didn't like the way that, ended up for me, the founder. So, I really wanted to avoid taking venture capital, having those pressures. And so I would really think hard before you take in outside money. And to the extent that you have to do it, if you can take it from friends and family, more patient money, I think your odds of success will go up versus raising a lot of money from sophisticated institutions where, again, the time horizons, the expectations are going to be sky high.
You started in 1984. You went public in 2005. You're suddenly a billionaire, and suddenly people know about it. Was it ever your goal to be a billionaire, and where did money rank in terms of your priorities and future goals? And what's your advice to all of the future entrepreneurs, a lot of my interns, most of my interns, whose number one goal is, I want to be rich?
Yeah, I don't think that should be your primary goal. I won't lie. I mean, building wealth was part of my objective. I wanted to earn money, but to me, it was more about independence. I think was, to me, the principal allure of being an entrepreneur. I really liked the creativity, the autonomy that came with running my own business. That to me, there's a bit, this may sound grandiose, but a bit of artistry in being able to control the canvas and, create something that was in your head. And not only the product that you're creating, but the culture of the company and just controlling that. But I did want to build wealth. That's one of the byproducts of all of this, the independence that come with that. And to me, it was always very important to, earn my own keep. How much wealth you need is debatable. I guess more is better than less.
Right.
But I wanted to be secure. But I wanted to do it on my terms. I said I didn't want to raise a lot of money and try and shoot for the stars. And if it worked, fantastic. If not, I wanted to make sure the business worked. To me, that was the, objective. To me, this was a marathon. I'm a long distance runner. I wanted to finish the race. And so to me, it was more important to have a viable, enduring, independent company that would survive for a very, very long time. And if I did that, I knew then, it should generate a fair amount of wealth that, I could pass on to my kids and live independently. What the exact numbers are, I didn't really have an idea. To me, it was more building a business around a passion. And so for would-be entrepreneurs, I would say I would downplay the money aspect. That should not be your primary motivation. I don't think Steve Jobs was motivated by money. He wanted to create something great. He wanted to create, change the world. That artistry that went into Apple. To me, that's more the model that you'd be thinking of. If you do that, the money will take care of itself. If your aim is first and foremost just to make a lot of money, you don't care how you do it, you may end up, taking a lot of shortcuts, doing things the wrong way. And so I think Buffett says, you should have with investing, some greed, but it should be controlled greed, around some ethics and principles. And so, yeah, you want to make money, but not at all costs. And there should be some greater aim overarching that I think is your primary motivation.
Let's move on to soccer, and we'll start with some stats here. Soccer is the most popular sport in the world. It has 5 billion fans. That's more than 62% of the world's population. It's the fourth most popular sport in the United States, behind football, basketball, and baseball. 31% of Americans call themselves soccer fans, and other than pickleball, it's the fastest growing sport in America. You did not play soccer growing up in Munster, Indiana. There was only football, basketball, and baseball, but your kids started to play and you coached at the AYSO level and you loved it. So you love soccer, you've got a ton of money, and in July of 2018, you paid $117.6 million for a 49% stake in the Chicago Fire soccer team at a valuation of $240 million. And then a year later, you paid $240 million for the 51% you didn't own, for a total investment of $321 million, which valued the club at over $400 million. At the time, People said you paid a premium because Major League Soccer was charging $200 million for expansion fee for new teams. Since 2019, the average MLS team's valuation has climbed 85% to $579 million. On February 2nd of this year, only 9 years after it joined the MLS and paid an expansion fee of $110 million, Forbes ranked the LA football team, which is owned by three amazing guys here in LA, as the first billion-dollar franchise. Is soccer going the way of the NFL, which started in 1920 and is now 103 years old, where it took 82 years for the average team to be worth $500 million, and where the average value of an NFL team is $4.1 billion?
Well, I think soccer's got a great future, as you enumerated, Randy. And, just as to back up a little bit, when I turned 60, I decided to step down from my CEO role at Morningstar. I'd been doing it since I was 27, love doing it. But life is short. If you want to do a few other things, you better get going at some point. And so I stepped up to executive chair. I'm the executive chairman of Morningstar today. But one of the things I wanted to do was diversify my investments a bit and invest in some of my other passions, of one of which is soccer, as you noted. And I got into it through my kids who started playing, and I just became enamored. I mean, it's super fun to watch your kids play soccer. It's a great sport. It's 90 minutes of nonstop action. I think it fits very well into a modern lifestyle. The rest of the world, it's number one around the world. And I think over time, the U.S. will catch up to the rest of the world. The World Cup is coming to North America in 2026, so there's a lot of momentum building up to that. And so, there was an opportunity in Chicago to buy the MLS team here, and I looked around the league, and I could see that in certain cities, Seattle, Portland, Atlanta, the MLS team was doing fantastic. LAFC, really connects well with the city. In Chicago, it really wasn't doing that. The location of the stadium wasn't ideal. And I thought I could do some things to improve the club. So I moved the club downtown to Soldier Field, put them on broadcast television, started investing in the team. And it's a journey. We're not done yet, but it's been a blast. I've had so much fun doing it, not only learning, about the business, about the sporting side. The business side, I kind of know that piece. How do you sell sponsorships, tickets? And then the civic side, how do you connect with a city very deeply? You can do that through a sports team. So it's been a journey. My whole family loves it, which is another, wonderful aspect. And so I've embarked on that, as you noted, a few years ago. And, it's one of the things I'm doing is I've, broadened my life a bit since stepping down from my CEO role at Morningstar.
Are you looking for your next great gift to surprise a friend, colleague, or loved one? Bliss Beaches makes the perfect gift. This best-selling, bright and beautiful coffee table book by Randall Kaplan features stunning drone photography from exotic beach locations around the world. It's the perfect housewarming gift, a great addition to any home or office, and a fun and creative alternative to bringing a bottle of wine to somebody's house for dinner. Bliss Beaches is available for purchase on Amazon, where it has glowing reviews and a 5-star rating. Get your next amazing gift and order a copy of Bliss Beaches by clicking the link in our show notes. We've talked about some of the things that make us successful. One of the hallmarks of my career has been something I call extreme preparation. It means preparing more than anyone else for whatever meeting, sales presentation, speech, or podcast. Can you give examples in your career how extreme preparation has led to your success?
Well, Randy, I know that's a true statement because for this interview, what you have researched about me goes way beyond what most people who have interviewed me in the past have dug up. And so I'm impressed with the amount of research that you've done. And so for my career, I'm not sure I'm to the extent of a preparer as you are. You sound, way out there. But I've tried to prepare as much as I can. I can think of it Morningstar, for important sales presentations, how much work we do in terms of really understanding the client, the need, understanding all the players involved, what their motivation is, understanding the client, the strategy, of the client, how we fit into that strategy, rehearsing the presentation. Every time you have an important event, you're always thankful that you've prepared as much as you did. And it always manifests itself in the time that when you come to that actual event. And so, yeah, whether it's preparing for a company meeting, shareholder meeting, it's all hands on deck. We're all preparing, and it's a great return on investment. But I don't know, at the end of the day, I find you can only prepare so much. It's like studying for an exam. At a certain point, I feel like I've maxed out. I know it, and I'm just ready to go and do it. And often others around me will counsel, now let's rehearse one more time. And so others will kind of push me to prepare a little more. And I'm always thankful that they did. Or for an interview, the prep for an interview, people asking those hard questions to prepare for an interview, is always super helpful. And so sometimes I have to be nudged into a little bit, but I'm always glad I do it. And I think it is great advice for anybody in any aspect of life, is to prepare. And, it returns manyfold the time spent.
Well, first, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. It's something I take great pride in. I'm writing a book called Extreme Preparation. I'm about to go out on the corporate speaking tour as well, because I've been teaching a lot of lessons on how extreme preparation leads to results that just would have not been possible. And I give the advice to people: everyone is always hiring. Everyone is hiring, always, no matter what. If you're that person, you do the research, you blow people off their chair, you're the most prepared person in the room. There's always room at any company for someone who can do that, because if they're doing it just for a meeting, imagine what they can do as an employee.
That's really true. I got my first job as a stock analyst by bugging the hell out of the research director at Harris Associates. I'm not sure they were hiring, but, I kept calling him, I sent letters, and eventually, I think just to, get me off his back, he talked to me, and then we hit it off. And, but it was just kind of pushing to the extent where you're wondering, am I being too annoying? And, but yeah, I think you kind of, you show your passion. But you're absolutely right. As somebody who's run a company for many years, involved in many companies today with venture investing and the Chicago Fire and other things, people always want great talent. If you can move the needle for a company, bring in revenue, reduce expenses, any company will hire you. That's such fantastic advice that companies are always hiring. And, the idea that, I didn't see a listing for this. No, go and talk to people, take them out to lunch, take them for coffee, talk to people in and around that. You'll find a way. If you can show how you can, make a presentation on ways you can improve whatever it is you're, want to do at that company, give them some ideas. Hey, these are 10 things I think you could do better. And, put in the time, you'll get results. And so you're spot on, Randy. I mean, people are always hiring. People always are. They're hungry for great talent, really hungry for that. And so I'm going to give that advice to my kids too. I love it.
You mentioned 27 years old. At 27 years old, I was the most unsuccessful lawyer you knew. I had 3 jobs in 8 months right out of law school. It was a disaster. I set a world record for that, I think. And then I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't like law school. It's very hard getting good grades studying for something that you really can't stand. And it's hard to focus. But I got good grades, moved to LA, $3,000 in the bank. I knew nobody, lost my job 5.5 weeks after getting here. And after having a 3rd job in 8 months, I said, gosh, this is really not working out. My plan is not working out. I had an idea that I wanted to be the right-hand person for a CEO. I wrote letters. I went on LexisNexis. There was no Google then. I did research. My law firm had one of these all-you-can-eat subscriptions. You had to bill all this to BizDev. And that's a whole nother story. The manager came into my office one day and said, she closed the door. Her name was Sue Mangles. She closed the door and said, Randy, you billed $40,000 worth of charges to BizDev this month. What's going on? Those weren't actual charges. The firm paid one fee, so I wasn't costing them money. But when I had this dream to do this, every single person said the same thing. Not a single person is going to meet with you. I got 80 meetings. Michael Eisner, Sumner Redstone, Eli Broad, who ended up being my boss. And I wrote the best letter, and that was my goal. I was going to write the best letter they've ever received. And of those 80 meetings, every single one of them said the same thing. I've never taken a cold meeting from my letter in my life, but I had to see the person and wanted to meet the person behind who did it. And so that was a lesson for me at a young age. Be different. Don't listen to people. Trust your gut. And it's okay to be doing something that no one else does. Sam Zell, who I'm sure you knew, was on my show as well. And Sam said, I couldn't understand why everyone was going left and I was the only one going right. And I think you just have to trust your instinct and do what you do and believe in yourself.
Yeah, people are much more accessible than you think, just by making the effort. I know I got to know Warren Buffett a bit, just sent him a letter, described kind of my situation, what I was doing, how admiring I was of him. And then he called me and, developed a relationship that we've kind of kept up. And he's invited me to his annual meeting every year. And, but it just came from, a letter I had sent him and then, developing a, relationship. But at first you think, oh, these people, maybe I can't approach them but even at a young age, which you demonstrated, you can do that. And so, go for it, shoot for the moon, try. And, you'd be surprised what doors open up. People are very willing to help out. People want to help others. People who've been successful want to give back. They want to help that next generation. And so I think they respond very well to, people who want to work hard, who, want to learn. And so I think all of that is very well received by people who've done well in life.
You mentioned giving back. So let's talk about your incredible generosity. You signed the Giving Pledge. You're going to give away billions of dollars during your lifetime. How important is giving back to our success?
Yeah, it's hugely important. If you've been blessed to, accumulate wealth in life, or even if you haven't, however you can give back, it doesn't have to be, I suppose, in a monetary form. But if you have been fortunate enough to accumulate wealth, there is a responsibility, I think, to, give back to society. We've been fortunate to have been born in the United States, to have a wonderful system that lets people like my parents kind of rise up, become a doctor and a nurse, me to start a business with very little capital. And so it's, I'll have plenty of money to give to my kids where they can kind of do whatever they want in life, and hopefully not enough where they can do nothing, but enough where they can do anything. And so there's plenty of left over to give back. I think the challenge is to find ways to do that that's meaningful, that you just don't fritter it away and you give it to institutions so that they can, raise more money, that it actually does some good. How do you do good in society and help people? I've tried to focus on a few areas: education, health, the city of Chicago, entrepreneurship, that I'm passionate about and hopefully can make a difference. But I feel like I'm still a novice in giving money back. I've spent my life building a company. And so now I'm kind of flipping to that stage of, giving back. And so I'm kind of learning as I go along and trying to, ramp it up slowly, and I'm moving up the learning curve. It's kind of a bit trite that it's hard to give away money, but it is, and to do that meaningfully. So I'm on that journey. I'm doing things that resonate with me. I've not set up a big organization, a big foundation and bureaucracy to do it, but it's more, people, institutions that I've come across that I think are doing sensible things and that resonate with me and my wife.
Do you feel pressure from people, and with all that wealth, to give away money? You look at Forbes, and the Forbes 400, I think, has something now called the generosity index. I mean, I'm getting it wrong, but it lists all the people have given away the most money each year. And then for the people who haven't given away as much money as they think you should give away, they're not calling them cheap, but certainly when you read about it, you get the impression these people are not generous and they're not giving away money.
Yeah, I've seen those rankings and lists, and I'm not sure I'm a fan of them. I hate to make it a competition, and to be, to judge others on their philanthropy. And it's a very personal thing. I don't want to really judge others on their philanthropy desires. I think a lot of us don't know what people are doing.
For sure.
Some of it may be above the surface and visible. A lot might be done anonymously. You don't see it. People, it's very personal how people want to go about it. And so I don't really want to sit in judgment of others. And I don't know, it feels a bit unseemly to have others judge, you on that. On the other hand, we did the giving pledge. And I think it's something we felt we were always going to do anyway, is kind of give a fair amount of money away. And as Warren Buffett said to me, well, if you're going to do that, you might as well be on the good side of the ledger, and, be seen as, and, set a role model. To me, part of the reason to sign that pledge was to be a role model. We talked earlier about leadership, parenting, setting an example. And so, I think setting an example is, someone who's accumulated a fair amount of wealth as to how to behave responsibly with that, to me, was the motivation. Because we debated, my wife and I, about it. Do we really want to be public about that? But I think it's important to set a good example. That so often you hear kind of, wealthy people maligned for being greedy, only thinking about themselves, trying to line their pockets, that's their motivation. But most people who've accumulated a fair amount of wealth that I know really don't think that way. They think about what's good for society, how to give back. There's a few, examples out there of wealthy people who, are not doing good things, but I think they're in the minority. I think most wealthy people are trying to give back, trying to make the world a better place. They've earned enough money. They're comfortable. They don't really need more. Yeah, they want to build wealth. But I don't think they want to do it in an underhanded way that would be at odds with what's good for society. And so, I try and do things that, things around education, charter schools, the University of Chicago, health outcomes, the city of Chicago that, hopefully make the world a better place. And really that's the motivation. And then being public about it is to try and set a good example for others and to say that, hey, people who have accumulated wealth really are trying to do good things. And they're not all about themselves and their motivations and what they do.
Before we finish today, I want to go ahead and ask some open-ended questions. I call this part of my podcast, Fill the Blank to Excellence. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
The biggest lesson I've learned in my life is?
How to do things the right way, not cut corners. I think, eventually, you're rewarded, even if it seems like it's going to cost you something, that doing things the right way, over time, you build up a reputation, and that the dividends just keep getting greater and greater as you go on in life, that people will want to partner with you. They'll want to work with you because of the way that you conduct your life. And so I think the biggest lesson is to do things the right way. Don't even get close to doing something, illegal or, that's questionable, but just to do the right thing. It's very simple. It's kind of, it's the golden rule, or just do things the right way. And if you do that, I think you'll be very well rewarded in life for it.
My number one professional goal is?
I think I was going to say to raise a good family, but a great family, but that's not a professional goal. I think professionally, to have an enduring company that helps a lot of people. And so professionally, again, an enduring company that creates a lot of good through its services in the world, and also really does well by the people within the company. that they feel fulfilled working there, that they can grow and nurtures them to really do their best work, and they want to work there.
I know how you're going to answer this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. My number one personal goal is?
Well, I think I just tipped my hand there earlier. Personal goal is to raise a great family. I mean, my kids are number one, and to make sure my kids, to support them and doing what they want to do. As I mentioned, they're college age now. And to me, there are my wife and mine, are pride and joy. And so, it's all about family and having a family where, we all get along well and we do what we can to support each other. We still vacation together. We like being around each other. To me, that's my greatest personal goal. And to have the kids turn out where you're proud of them as people, that's a tremendous source of satisfaction.
I have 5 kids. I live for my kids. I just dropped off one of my 21-year-old twins in Wisconsin. She goes to UW in Madison, and I've moved her into college every year. And we had 4 days alone together, early move-in. So I didn't have to compete with her roommates, her friends, and it was one of the highlights of my life. I don't think I'm ever going to get in the rest of my lifetime 4 days alone with my daughter. And these moments that we have as parents are just so special. And I get teary-eyed even thinking about it now because, you love your kids more than anything and you just want them to first be healthy and second to be happy. So I
couldn't agree more. When I think back, having those one-on-one moments with a child are especially meaningful. I know I have a girl and 2 boys, but with my 2 boys, I biked across Iowa with them individually when they were 12 years old. Wow. For 7 days. There's a ride called RAGBRAI. It's the most popular bike ride in the U.S. And it's 7 days. You go from the Missouri River to the Mississippi. But I spent 7 days with each child separately, but, sleeping in a tent every night. And I look back so fondly on that week with each one of my sons. I would have done it with my daughter, but I didn't know about the ride when she was at that age. And so, but I did it with my 2 boys. But having that one-on-one time where you spend 7 days, and not only that, sleeping in a tent with them, for 1 week, so memorable, so precious. But that, those times you spend with a child or with the entire family, there's nothing that can compare to it.
Starting at 6 years old, I've taken each of my kids on a one-on-one trip each year. As the twin girls got to be 8, 10, they always went together. And again, some of the biggest highlights of my life. And I tell this to all my friends who have parents because we're all busy. There's always a reason why something comes up and you can't go. You got to mark it down. But my friends who have followed my counsel on this have all said, geez, that's one of the best things I've ever done. And I continue to do it as the girls now get older and my son, they're busy with their friends and, I think bribe is the wrong word, but we go on nice vacations and I think, they pick the locations. They're not economical at times. They like staying in nice places, but whatever it takes to get a week with them, with their dad, it's worth every penny of it. Let's continue with a couple more questions here. If you could go back in time, the one piece of advice that you would give your 21-year-old self is?
Don't be in a hurry, enjoy the journey. I think sometimes I was a little too eager. And so, I went, for example, to business school right from undergrad. I think it would have been good to work a couple years and then go back to business school. When I started business school, I was 21. The average age was 27. I didn't really have much work experience. Everybody else had worked at, IBM or, some big company. But I think I was in so much of a hurry to kind of get going that I think I could have slowed down a little bit and kind of enjoyed things a little more, maybe gotten a little more out of it. I mean, it all turned out okay. But I think I was always in such a hurry. Yeah, I think I like the way things turned out. I think sometimes I was maybe frustrated that we weren't growing more quickly. I'd look around and see these companies that are 25 million in sales, and I'm doing 500,000. It's like, what am I doing wrong? And so I think I put maybe a little too much pressure on myself early on. But I think, enjoy the journey. Probably was what I tell myself.
The biggest regret is?
Ooh, biggest regret, professionally or just in my life?
In your life.
Either,
both.
I think more on the upside. I don't really have a lot of regrets. I guess, probably not spending more time, with family members, when I was in high school, college, I think not until I had kids did I really kind of get outside myself. I think before I had kids, I was more about me and what I was doing. And I think I could have paid more attention to parents, siblings, in high school, college. And I think I was so focused on my business and what I was doing, and to think a little more broadly about those around me, friends. And it's fantastic starting a business, but it can be all consuming, and it kind of, envelops your life in a way that is good. But maybe a regret is, hey, because people aren't around forever. My parents are no longer living. And when I think back, it's like, gee, I could have, gone down to Munster, Indiana, spent a little more time with them, or, it's those times you can't get back. And so, I think spending a little more time with loved ones, in my college and the years that I was, early years that I was starting a business.
The one thing I've dreamt of doing for a long time, but haven't is?
Oh, well, I can do most things I want to do. It's funny, we're getting to this stage now where my youngest is going off to college. So we're about to enter this chapter of empty nesthood, which is kind of a new domain for my wife and I. And so, I think the things I've been dreaming about, are things we're about to be able to do, in that we've been so tied to the school calendar for a couple of decades, right, that we've only taken vacations, in the summer, over the Christmas holidays. And so to be able to travel, in the fall, in the spring, when things aren't crowded, we have a home up in Michigan that I've not been to in the fall when the leaves are turning for ages, because the kids are doing sports in high school. And so just to have the freedom to travel more. So I'm looking forward to traveling a little more, and having that freedom to work from anywhere. And I love Chicago, but I've been here because the kids have been here. And, my mantra is I follow the kids. If they're home in Chicago, I'll be home in Chicago. But if they're away in college, and now we're, approaching this empty nesthood, we've got freedom to really be anywhere. And so I look forward to spending more time, not only in the U.S., but abroad. And those are some of the things I've been kind of looking forward to, and, we'll start doing hopefully come fall, when we have an empty nest here in Chicago.
If you could meet one person in the world, who would it be?
Ooh, one person. That's a lot of people to choose from. I'm really admiring of so many people. Warren Buffett's lived a great life. But there's a lot of historical figures who have changed the world for the better. You think of what Lincoln did, how he kind of, took the country into a better place through perilous times. I've been reading a lot of biographies. Ulysses S. Grant, Harry Truman, Teddy Roosevelt. So my mind is filled with, those kinds of figures. But I think somebody who's done a lot of good in this world, Steve Jobs, has been an amazing story. I love the way that he approached business, kind of changed it from just being, purely about business, but bringing an artistry component, kind of, how he admired the artist and, brought that aspect into business. So I don't know that there's any one person. It's probably an amalgam. But I think somebody who's lived their life with integrity, has made the world a better place. And at the same time has, raised a family. And that's a lot of people. I'm not sure I could name a single person. So you've kind of stumped me on that single person.
The one question you wish I asked you but didn't is?
Oh, Randy, you've got some tough questions. I think we've covered a lot about, I'm thinking, my professional life, my family life. Is there anything we didn't touch on? I often talk about, when I interview people, kind of what they're reading. I think, if you ask people what they read, it's kind of a window into who they are. And so I often like to talk about books with people. I often ask people what they're reading to get some ideas. We've kind of maybe touched on a bit what I've been reading, which is, biographies of, I've just went through some of the people I've been reading. I also like reading books on health. I just had lunch with the guy who runs Northwestern Hospital, Dr. Howard Chrisman, and he recommended a book to me called Outlive, which I'm about a quarter of the way through. And I would highly recommend it. It's about, it's written by a guy who went to Stanford Medical School, and but studying kind of longevity and looking at what he calls medicine 3.0. Medicine 2.0 is fixing things that have gone wrong. So you have a heart issue, you have cancer, but by then, it's very late to rectify things. Medicine 3.0 is, the seeds of those illnesses have been sown decades earlier. What can you do today that will improve your odds of not getting what he calls the 4 horsemen of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and dementia are the 4 horsemen. So what can you do today to minimize, those odds? And it's a really good book, very accessible. And so I've been reading that. And so I usually read multiple books, but maybe the one question is, hey, what are you reading that you like? That's a question I often ask people.
Joe, this has been an incredible conversation. I've admired you for a long time. I've admired the company. I've known about the company, even looked at buying the company. Not that you would have ever sold it, but for many, many years, it's inspired me to do what I'm doing with Sandy. So I appreciate you being a role model, not only to me, but to so many people. And your generosity is amazing. Congratulations on all you've done, and thank you for all you've done. Thanks for being here.
No, thank you, Randy. I enjoyed the conversation. All fun things to talk about. So good luck with your podcast. And I've enjoyed getting to know you through the podcast as well.